We are back talking 2023 NFL Draft on the Our Football Network. Dave Syvertsen is with us. And Dave, good to have you back, Senior Draft Consultant for ourlads.com.
Ourlads, yeah, that's right. Thank you for having me, Greg. How are you?
Good. Can't wait to keep doing this. It's
yes, sir.
It's great to one end to have finally a winning football team and to know that this is going to potentially be a nice long run. To not have to worry about the draft after that's been a big part of being a Jet fan for the past 11, 12 years. But still, it doesn't matter. It's just a great. I mean, if you're into the NFL and college football, you're obviously into the draft, and you and I are into it like.
Almost to a fault, I would say. I think we're kind of auto-programmed.
It's in our blood. So, yeah, and this year's going to be great because we haven't had the opportunity to do it together. We've got such a big backing with our lads, so it just gives us an opportunity and look, we've been there behind the scenes, and I've been able to do these programs with Dan for many years, first on the radio, now basically in video, and to bring you in after being really behind the scenes for the most part for the past several years. It's exciting. So.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be an exciting year. I'm really looking forward to it. And I can't wait to get it going. I'll be looking forward to these talks that we do weekly up until draft weekend.
And last week, we kind of talked a little bit about 2022, but that was just a way to kind of kick things off and talk about that. But and I spoke with Corbin Smith. He covers the Seahawks, and they got a podcast, Locked On Seahawks podcast. He does a great job, Corbin. And so we had this discussion. I think it was yesterday, and so I brought up our discussion on Tariq Woolen, and that you thought that if we were talking about rookie all-pro teams, that, hey, if Gardner's on one side, that Woolen should be maybe on the other. And Corbin, of course, even though he was like, well, not just because I'm a Seattle guy, but hey, I'm willing to accept that. But he was like, you know what? I think Woolen's on the first team, on the first side.
Okay.
But
in front of Gardner,
he said that, and I knew where he was coming from because he brought it up, the interceptions. And that's what we talked about. By the way, we did the show last Sunday. A couple hours later, Sauce comes up with his first interception
against Josh Allen in a big moment.
So you see, that's how you need the interceptions in order for a lot of people to because if you don't have those interceptions and one guy's got 5, they sometimes will point to the guy with 5.
I mean, I will say one thing, and this is not taking anything away from Woolen. I love him.
Yes.
I mean, if you take every corner of the draft, I think he's the second best right now in the NFL. So, but I think if you're going to look at numbers and not have the time or resources to watch the tape, which I completely understand, what a number you could look at is just look at how many times they're being thrown at. And Gardner, the last time I checked, he was thrown at less frequently. I'm not taking anything away from Woolen, but if we're only going to look at interceptions, you do have to look at that. And I also like to look at some separation metrics, like how much separation guys are getting, because there's a reason why they're throwing at Woolen. I think it's going to be, fewer and far between now because of how productive he's been. But I mean, Gardner blankets guys in ways that I haven't seen a rookie corner do in a long time. And that's why I think he's the top guy. Interceptions are a metric. It's not the metric for me.
All right, let's talk. Again, last week was 2022 a little bit. We did the quarterbacks last week, so you have to check that out. It's time to talk about running back, skill position, running backs, receivers. Next week we'll do tight ends and offensive line. Then we'll get into defense. But we're going to talk and I always have to bring this up every year, and I'll bring it up several times a year. The thing I learned with Dan Shanka, because it was every year we would do a show, and every year I would start asking him about running backs and receivers, especially receivers. And as soon as I start asking him about the first receiver, it's the same response every time. It depends on what his 40 time is. And so I learned over the years, just, you can't bring it up because you could bring up things like separation. You could be, route running and hands. You could always bring that stuff up. That's important.
Yep.
But
absolutely.
It is still the be all end all is what is your 40 time?
especially for the receivers and corners. Those guys, I mean, we talked about last week briefly about how metrics and certain minimums need to be hit just to be considered draftable by most players. But to really kind of stack your board, right? I mean, you have so many receivers every year. I mean, I think this number grows every single year, how many guys are getting drafted or how many end up being priority free agents. It's not just free agents. And the way you stack these, I mean, there's so many even grades that the 40 is often, and within good reason, a tiebreaker. If you have 6 guys in the same tier and you really can't really decide between them, the 40 time really can separate. It's a game of inches, right? I mean, if you watch enough football, you'll see that week in, week out, that inches matter, and in inches in relation to a receiver, it comes down to how fast they can move and what balls they can get to and what balls they can't get to.
Yeah, I mean, just take a look at, matter of fact, Seattle, Kobe Bryant. Now, Kobe Bryant, maybe Kobe Bryant is drafted a little earlier if it wasn't for some of his metrics.
For
he
sure.
won the Thorpe Award. He's right next to Ahmad Gardner, for crying out loud. And I know you can't always put in stock what college football awards and things of that nature, but it was a point. And then what about Burks? Everybody was thinking, oh, Burks, top 10 pick. Watch out.
Yep.
He's a sleeper. Watch this guy.
Yep.
I know nobody's talking Arkansas. He doesn't come from Alabama. Watch this guy. All of a sudden, he runs a terrible 40 time. And people are like, oh, man, he's not even going in the first round.
Right. I mean, hey, it matters. That's what we're getting to. But also, yes, it is possible and likely. I mean, Cooper Kupp ran a 4.62. Like, you can have a lot of success in the NFL without a good 40. That's not what we're talking about. We need to separate what these guys do in the league in relation to where they're being drafted. When you're talking about where a kid is going to be drafted, the 40 without a doubt matters. Kobe Bryant's a great example. If he was a sub 4.4 guy, he probably ends up being a first-round pick. But because he ran, I think he was in the 4.5s, if I remember correctly, he gets bumped down a couple rounds.
And he's playing well.
Playing very well from the nickel, absolutely, yep.
We're going to start at running back, and I promise everybody out there that even though basically we're going to begin with, and Dave is going to, I don't know if you've already put out, I know you put out the top 96 rankings last week. So are you going to be putting out or have you already put individual rankings out yet for each position?
We put out individual stacks. I took care of the offensive guys, and John Cooper, one of our senior guys, took the defensive side of the ball. But we started putting that list together in September, knowing that it would be so fluid. I mean, I have multiple changes to the spots I was responsible for since those stacks have been put out. But I'm pretty sure we're going to be restacking. We'll put it on the website after the college season is over. So at some point, December, January.
So I asked you, even though you're going to get to it in about a month or so, to come up with just a temporary kind of top 10, which is what we did last week. And look, there's no question that your list is going to change. Like, you probably change every week.
Honestly,
especially top 50. I'd say top 50, maybe even more so for running backs this season with the depth it has, because there are names on the list that could clearly be in your top 10 that are not in your top 10 right now. So what we're going to do, though, before we get into some of those names, is talk about your list. And I tell you what, let's talk a little bit about Kendre Miller from TCU. We'll start there because Miller, if we take a look at TCU this season and what's going on there, all of the attention has gone to Duggan, and maybe rightly so. He's had an incredible season. What do you think about, is Miller having the year you expected him to have, or because, like I'm saying, it just does seem like it's just all Duggan.
Yeah, I mean, he's already over 1,000 yards.
That tells you right there. Yeah,
and I'll tell you what, Zach Evans was on this team last year at TCU. He missed the second half of the year with an injury. He transferred to Ole Miss. He's on this list as well. I love Zach Evans.
What a 1-2 punch Ole Miss has, huh?
Yeah. I mean,
do they have the best? Like, is Judkins the best true freshman running back?
No question. I would put him one of the top 10 backs in the country right now. Wow. And he'll be a fun name to watch over the years. But it's funny, just reading some of the content that was put out when Zach Evans transferred from TCU to Ole Miss, it seemed like he was somewhat running away from Kendre Miller. knowing that he was going to start taking some of the carries away from him. You can make the case that he wanted to be against the SEC and show, what he could do on that level, similar to Gibbs in Alabama. And it's worked out for him. I think he's going to be a day 2 pick, Evans. But Kendre Miller, if you're going to ask me, what's the one back on my top 10 that I do think could really soar up if he has a couple good workouts like we just talked about? It's this kid, because the running style in which he moves with, it reminds me so much of Alvin Kamara. And like Kamara, he's not a small guy. He's just a very smooth but also violent runner. And he can run with both styles. He can run in space and make you miss. And then he can run between the tackles and push the piles and force a lot of yards after contact. It's one of the numbers I look for the most out of college backs. And
yes,
he's right up there. I believe I have him top 10 in the country. He's top 5 among Power 5 schools in yard after carry average. So I think yard after contact carry. So he gets the ball, he gains another 4 yards after contact with defenders. That's top 10 in the country, top 5 among Power 5 schools. And that's not even the best part of his game. I just think he can be really elusive in space. He's great on short yardage situations, not because he runs guys over. He knows where the lane's going to be. He finds a crease and he gets through it. And I think that he's going to be a kid that ends up maybe a little bit higher than where I have him if he can put together a few good workouts.
Yeah, that's the other thing that we're going to zero in on in the coming months is, and maybe even have a complete, because what I like to do too is once we have all of our rankings and each position and so forth, I like to then go inside for like for instance for running backs, say, okay, well, let's now break this up into, okay, who are your top 5 all-purpose,
right,
next wave NFL, what they're looking for, like, okay,
yeah.
They're acceptable, almost like an Austin Eckler. They're acceptable as a number 1 running back, but you really like them as a pass catching threat. So, and as a Michigan fan, that's the way I feel about Donovan Edwards. It's like if he comes back, and I believe he can graduate. I believe he can go pro. But if he comes back, Corum leaves, then maybe he gets an opportunity to showcase, hey, I'm the number 1 guy, and so forth and so on.
Right.
But my point is that that's what's going to be kind of cool. And what do you look at as Miller's top trait?
I would say that the yards after contact.
Okay, and there's that's another one we can do. Best yards after contact running backs.
Yeah. The yards after contact and vision. I just feel like you rarely see him pick the wrong lane, and a little bit easier in the space friendly Big 12 where the defense is just Swiss. It's just a bunch of holes everywhere. But he picks the right running lane and he makes up his mind quick. He's not someone that dances around and kind of waits for something. He goes and gets it, and that's what I like most about his game.
And so you have Evans ranked ahead of Miller. Is it by much?
Yes. No, I mean, I think the guys 4 through 8 on my board, or 4 through 9, sorry, you can interchange them. It's kind of like what I talked about with the quarterbacks last week. And I do think, like you said, it's going to be based on where these guys end up in the draft. I think it's going to be very much based on what teams need into their backfield, right? And if you kind of look at every single pro depth chart, you go on their RLAD site, you look at what they have at running back. I mean, you can come up with 10 teams and they need 10 different ththings in the backfield, and they ask 10 different things of their backs within their offense. So I do think he could pass Evans at some point. Okay. I think that the fumble, it's the one thing about Miller's game that's bothering me a little bit is the ball security. The fumble percentage is a little too high for me. It's been a problem this entire career. It looks a little better this season, but I need to see more out of that. He doesn't get a ton of carries every game, so I just need to wait. I want to wait and see this entire season play out before I really label that a non-issue at this point.
Okay, now we got to talk about the 2 little dudes. Let's start with Deuce Vaughn from K-State, because you can just tell for both Corum and Vaughn immediately that, well, look how good they are, but they're just so tiny. They're just so small. Yeah. So they can't possibly be full-time running backs in the NFL. Mm-hmm. They can't possibly get drafted high in the NFL based on their size, especially the NFL, the way they think about running backs. So what do you think about Deuce Vaughn at the next level?
I mean, it's hard not to. I hate to bring up the school stereotype, but it's hard not to see Darren Sproles in his game. And it's the running style. It's not just the size metrics. He runs so low to the ground. I mean, he's already a short guy. He's probably going to measure around 5'6", 5'7", but he runs with great knee bend and ankle flexion, and it just gets him that much closer to the ground. He's just simply a hard guy to square up. You know, he's forced 33 missed tackles this year, which is a pretty high number. But his yards after contact aren't strong. So what does that mean? He makes guys miss completely.
Yeah.
Like if this was two-hand touch, his stats would be the same. You know, like when you do get a good clean shot on him or you get a good grip on his jersey, he'll go down. And I think that's going to be a little bit of an issue. I think that's going to knock him down a little bit. But you put him in an offense where he's a complement to an already number one back, and you try to give him 10 to 12 looks a game in the screen game. You get him out in space.
Absolutely.
He's dangerous.
I mean, you put him. I see how they put him out in the slot, and it's like, how did the little guy in the slot? And it works because he's such a good receiver.
And I think that's one thing he's cleaned up. He doesn't drop the ball like he did in his first 2 years. And if he can really prove that his receiving skill set has been taken to a higher level, there's no question that he's going to be sought after. You don't see a lot of backs this size go early. I have some metrics that, you know, those first 3 rounds of the draft, you rarely see someone drafted under 195 pounds at running back, but there are exceptions, and I think he's going to be an exception.
Okay, so have you had the time yet to look at the history of the NFL draft and which player has been drafted first round or second round at the, like, where's that line as far as size? Like, hey, there hasn't been a guy drafted at 5'7" or 5'8" or 5'6" in the second or first round in the NFL either ever or in 20 years. Have you had time to look at that yet?
I mean, in the past 20 years, I don't think anyone's been drafted below 185 pounds, which I think right now, the measurement I have on him.
I think it was 176 when the season began.
Yeah. I don't think I ever have anyone above sub 180 that was drafted on the first rounds 1 through 3 at running back. And so I do think it's going to be a little bit of a struggle for him. But again, he's a unique player. It's similar to Bryce Young, like that we talked about last week, not to bring the quarterbacks up again, but there are exceptions. And it's not like it's not like his game is built on speed only. He's got some pop to him. He's got short area quickness, burst, and he's got toughness. He's not a soft kid at all. And I think that he is going to have an issue blocking at the next level.
Oh, yeah.
He's showing an issue there.
That's not why he's there. No.
Yeah, so you're going to just have to be careful and selective. And sometimes that does bother coaches. It's like, hey, if we bring this kid on the field, we're telegraphing too much, right? You can't really ask him. And blocking is big for a lot of offenses at the running back position. So if he is going to be a specialty player, the first 3 rounds of the draft might be considered rich for him right now.
I agree.
I'm still I'll keep him in my top 100 overall, top 96 overall. Do I think he's going to get drafted in that area? No, but I do think if the right mind gets his hands on him in the draft, you're going to hear his name a lot.
Okay, now we'll go right to Corum, Blake Corum.
Yeah.
So Corum is you got the same kind of size, but Corum's a little bit bigger. I mean, a little bit taller, and he's bigger. And he is also very fast. And unlike Vaughn, like you said, he's got that yards after contact, but it's really more of they don't touch him because they really can't because he's not built that way. But Corum, even though he's a little guy, he breaks tackles like he's a big guy. I mean, this guy just bounces. You have to wrap him up. I've seen countless plays as a Michigan fan, countless plays where he is stopped at the line of scrimmage, stopped in the backfield, and not only does he break the tackle, but he can go for 50 yards on the same play.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he leads the country in yards, in runs over 15 yards. Number 1 in the country. And I think he's a pinball to me. If you don't wrap him up and get a good clean hit on him, and tackling in football now, it seems like a lost art.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost it's a predominant that defenders just don't tackle the way they used to. They go for the big hits. They show their face mask to the ground. They're not even looking at the guy that they're going after sometimes. And I think Corum is the guy that takes advantage of that. I mean, he bounces off guys. Not only does he bounce off of them, I've seen him do this several times. He accelerates off of missed tacklers. It's almost like he uses them for leverage to kind of catapult himself out into the open field. I think his greatest trait, and you have to watch this from the all 22 angle, is his vision. I think that it's a really hard trait to find in a running back, especially in college, that can forecast, anticipate, and react as fast as Corum does. And I think that's where you can hide some of the size issues. I think he's an outstanding inside runner, and I'll take that pad level, quickness, suddenness, toughness, and the vision over a Brandon Jacobs 245 pounder that just wants to run guys over.
Yep.
And I think that he's going to last longer, some of the guys too, because he won't take as many of those hits to the ankles and knees that a lot of those big backs do.
And he's also, just like Vaughn, you can put him out in the slot. You can now he gets overshadowed because Edwards is an elite receiver. But if you need to, you can put him out there, and he can be a good. He can be really dangerous in that part of the game as well.
Yep.
Okay, because I got to tell you, for his size, I don't recall. You have to remind me who the last running back that was his size that was this impressive.
Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, I think Tiki Barber was probably bigger than Corum height-wise, and then he put a little bit. And I think Corum would probably pack on a little bit of weight, but I'd have to go look at my all-time measurable spreadsheet to kind of give you an accurate list.
But you can't.
On that.
It just doesn't pop into your head. It's just like you have to probably go back 20, 30 years. I don't
honestly,
remember.
I'm not comparing him to Emmitt Smith, but he has that similar body type and running style where, hey, on paper he's not a big guy, but he plays big because of his running style and the fact that he knows how to use his size to his advantage.
Yeah. All right. Speaking of Michigan running backs, because it's funny because initially beginning when Zach Charbonneau transferred to UCLA, it didn't take long that you started noticing, hey, wait a second, as a Michigan fan, where's this Zach Charbonneau been at Michigan? Boy, we could really use him. And this was early last year. But then all of a sudden, Michigan got on a roll and they're running backs. And it was like, yeah, okay, I'm glad for Zach. But, everybody's fine. It worked out for everybody. But Zach really did. I don't know what it was, whether it just was the right fit, whether he just grew up a little bit more, but and he's just gotten better and better and better. He's got awesome size. He might be, because he's at UCLA and not with the top programs. I can't believe we're saying UCLA isn't like a top, but nobody really pays attention to UCLA like they used to. That he could probably consider the sleeper, maybe even first round, second round running backs in the entire draft.
I do think he's overlooked, and I'll tell you why. You said you brought up the number one factor, the size, but it carries over to his running style. I do think he's the best yard after contact back in the class. He's the guy that if he said, hey, 3rd and 3, 3rd and 2, 4th and 1, need a touchdown at the goal line, if there's one guy, I'm picking him. And it's because he just does everything well. And I think the thing that you like about Charbonneau that you just touched on, I feel like he's the safest kid in the class because he does everything well. He doesn't have a standout trait. And that's okay to me at the running back position because the running back position is so much about what's going on around him. The scheme, the blocking, right? If you can't block up front, it's just not going to work. Look at what's happened to Saquon Barkley since he's been drafted, right? Now that he finally has a halfway decent offensive line, he's having a career year, right? So I think that, he doesn't drop the ball as a receiver.
Doesn't fumble
the ball. Nope. Doesn't fumble. And he can take a pounding. And a lot of these backs that I have in front of him are kind of stacked evenly with him at this point. I'm not sure if they can be a number one guy. I think they're a great complement, which, again, in the backfield in the NFL, that's the way things work on most offenses, right? You have a couple guys that are sharing the duty. He's the one that I think could be the number one guy, and then you would kind of build around him. Is the upside as high? Is the potential impact and the playmaking ability and the explosive plays? I don't think he brings that to the table like some of these others, like Blake Corum. But by no means do I mean that he needs to be stacked that far below him. And I do believe that he, like you said, he could be a surprise top 45 pick.
Absolutely. If you're looking for, like you said, if your goal is to find a number one running back that can carry the ball for you between 15 and 25 times a game, he could be right there at the top of the list.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and like you said, this may be the safest because the other
Yeah.
guy I might as well also bring in that's very similar as far as size, as far as talent, is your top running back, uh, Bijan Robinson from Texas. And
Hmm.
I'm really looking forward. If you got, look, if this is a perfect time because we're recording this on Friday and we're going to
Hmm.
have this out before tomorrow's game.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
Texas, TCU, right there. You've got the running backs for both teams.
Yep.
Perfect opportunity to be to kind of do your own scouting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, he is right now the clear cut number one. And I hate saying stuff like that because a lot can change, even at this position, even with Bijan himself. But, when you talk about traits that NFL teams are looking for at running back, all right, you do need size, you need speed, quickness, vision, and the receiving skill set. If Bijan went into enter the draft as a wide receiver, I still think he's a top 45 pick. He can make catches away from his body as good as most receivers, and then what he can do after the catch, end in space. There's so much you can do with this kid, and I think that tomorrow's opportunity against TCU, and I guess this is airing tonight, so I should say tonight's opportunity against TCU, it could be the moment that he needs because he hasn't been consistently dominant, which is you want to see that from guys that I label as a top 10 running back.
Okay.
I mean, I would like to see him kind of have a breakout performance in this game. I do think it's possible against this defense, the way that
True.
the scheme is put together. He's going to have a lot of space to work with. And like you said, for anyone that hasn't really had close eyes on him, I would try to make sure you're in front of that TV before this game.
Yeah, because I'm even looking over my notes. I put all my own notes together for as many of the players that I thought would be like top 200 picks in the draft and for the next few years. And
Mm-hmm.
some of my notes here at the end of it, I have elite cutback ability and receiver, smart runner with superstar potential. And I don't say that myself very often because I'm sure that's
Okay.
what you do as well. When you're just putting your little notes in, you're saying to
Yep.
yourself, these are little just catchphrases or little nicknames
Yeah.
that you have for specific players. And that's the thing about Robinson is that we can say Charbonneau is a little bit of a sleeper type, but in all respect, Robinson has been because Texas has
Right.
not really been on the big stage. Yeah, Alabama earlier this year for one game when really nobody was paying attention as much as they would be now. So, yes, just imagine. I think there's going to be a ton of people that should be watching the game on Saturday night. And this might be the most eyeballs really ever
Right.
on Bijan Robinson because nobody was watching the Oklahoma Texas game earlier this year. So this could be, like you said, the opportunity for him to showcase because he was an amazing high school running back. His numbers were just mind-boggling. And so when you see that in high school, 5-star recruit, and then it carries over to college, you say, you know what, this kid's the real deal.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that you guys want to watch tomorrow in that TCU game, if you get in front of that TV, is just the amount of times he does not go down on initial contact. I'm pretty sure last time I checked, he leads the country in missed tackles forced. So, and that's a big number. It goes back to what I said. I'm just going to keep beating a dead horse here with the yards after contact, how important it is, and
that's this year because I remember I think he led the FBS last year in those categories.
Yeah, and it's still you just know it's a constant trait to his game, and that carries to the next level. That's a trait that does carry to the next level very well when you're looking at backs that have success in college and the NFL. It's that broken tackle rate, and I mean, he does it every way too. It's balance, it's quickness, it's vision, it's cutbacks, and then he'll lower his shoulder and truck guys if he needs to.
Let's see. He had over 7,000 high school yards. He had 114 touchdowns. And
wow.
let's not forget he was the 2020 Valero Bowl offensive MVP as a freshman with 183 yards and a touchdown. So
wow, that's good information right there.
He hasn't stopped. It's
no, he hasn't stopped. Yes, what would cause you to think that he would stop at the next level?
And
he's got the ideal running back build, 6 foot 220. He's chiseled. He's got big thighs, a big rear. I mean, he's got everything that you would kind of make in a factory if you were making a running back prospect.
Let's talk about Alabama's Gibbs, not Georgia Tech's Gibbs. Georgia, that's transfer portal for you. But Gibbs decided to go to Alabama. Unfortunately, it didn't work out in the long run because Alabama will not be playing for a national championship this season. But you talk about all-purpose backs. He might be at the top of the list. I mean, he's got all that and more. What do you think is going to be his trademark? As if NFL teams are looking for what are they looking for with Gibbs?
I mean, you're looking at a receiving skill set like Robinson that could be on par with a lot of the receivers in this draft. But I think the big play potential is what a lot of offenses are going to like about him. He's got the speed, he's got the size, but his footwork is impeccable. It's pro caliber. When you watch him, he's one of those kids that looks like they're on ice skates when they're moving, right? Like just the transition, the fluidity in his hips, his lower body joints. He has an outstanding ability to change direction while moving at a full rate of speed. And his full rate of speed is 4.4 caliber. He might be a sub 4.4 guy at the combine. And if he does, I think he could be someone that sneaks into the first round. And if there's one guy who said, hey, Dave, what's one guy that could pass Robinson in the running back stacks down the draft, it's Gibbs.
Wow. And is that more so because of his all-purpose ability? Because Robinson was definitely more of a, if you're looking for, again, like we said with Charbonneau, he's the closest. He's the other guy that's closest to being, okay, I need a full-time guy.
I think what you like in Gibbs is just the big play potential. Okay. And explosive plays are a huge thing in the NFL. Right. With the analytics kind of taking over, they say, hey, when your odds of scoring a touchdown when you gain a play of 20-plus yards goes up by 40%. Like those kind of numbers, as much as I'll laugh at them sometimes, they do matter in the NFL. Yes. And you could see it is taking over to an extent. And I think the metrics and the analytics behind Gibbs' game will bring some thought to, hey, this kid might be at least on the same level as Robinson. The Georgia Tech coaches, when he went to Alabama, they were saying that kid's going to win the Heisman there. Like they were thinking he is that good. He is that kind of athlete, and he's produced. He's shown out this year.
Oh yeah, it's not his fault.
Yeah, he's been a huge asset for that offense, and I do think, the Alabama receivers this year, they have not contributed like we have been used to seeing in recent memory, and I think Gibbs has benefited from that. He's showing that he is on par with them. Like some of these other kids that we've talked about already, pass blocking is an issue. He's someone I call a one and done guy. He gets you one clean shot, but he won't sustain anything. Can that be taught? Sure. I don't think anyone's going to draft him to pass protect, so I'm not sure that's going to be a big glaring hole on his game. But I think that there's a big play potential here that some of these other guys can't give. Every time he touches the ball, it's a legitimate, credible threat to bring into the house.
One more guy, and I'm going to bring in some guys that are not on your list, and that is Ibrahim from Minnesota, because he's been there forever due to the injuries. Yep. And you go all the way back to the fact that he was the 2020 Big Ten running back of the year. You're looking at a guy that was a bowl MVP, and I believe that was his freshman season. Second most yards by a Minnesota freshman, over 1,100 yards, and they have a storied college football program, really. So, but the Achilles injury, it's tough.
Yeah. It's an issue.
How do you draft him?
It is tough. I mean, I look at Zamir White from Georgia last year, who went in round 4 to the Raiders. I mean, he had both knees done, ACL, dating back to high school and then through college, and he still ends up going 4th round. He's a little bit more. He's a bulkier back, and I do think that kind of helped his cause. But this isn't a big kid. But when I watch him, especially the fact that he tore his Achilles last season, and already he's playing at the level in which he is right now. When I watch him play running back, if I was a coach, I would use his tape to teach my running backs on how to play the position.
Wow.
And it just the way he presses the hole, the way he lowers his pad level before contact, the way he keeps his feet active after contact, and the way he protects the ball. 3 fumbles over the course of 770 touches.
That's awesome.
That's a trend. That's something that you circle on the sheet because, again, turnovers are a killer. They do matter. If a kid has an issue holding on to the football, some teams will take them off their board right away, right?
Yes.
Or at least bump them down. You're not going to have that issue with him. He's second in the country in touchdowns. I do think that you have a credible case when you just bring up the injuries and also the fact that he's just touched the ball so much in college. And Does that mean he
Yeah.
ends up like Bruce Hall getting injured early on, or is that just a freak thing? Who knows? With all this synthetic turf talk that we have talking about with the NFLPA trying to get rid of turf in the NFL now, but I think one thing that goes against him as well is the blocking and receiving skill set. It's not there. And if you're going to say that this is a 210-pound back with beat up wheels already, and he's not going to help you much in the passing game, will that bump him down enough? To me, I'm going to keep him at least somewhere near this where I have him right now, because I am so confident that if he gets touches, if he gets carries, he's going to be a productive player, and he's going to protect the ball. And, just knowing him as a person a little bit, he's as hungry as you're going to find, as mature as you're going to find. And that means something to teams. Some teams more than others, but, I trust that this kid's going to far exceed where he's drafted in terms of dividends.
When you look, by the way, Draft Sharks does an excellent job. They have something called an injury predictor. And really what it is it gives you an opportunity to take a look at players that are coming into the NFL and what and during their NFL career and when they sustained injuries and what those injuries were. So that's a really cool tool, not just for fantasy fans, but just for people in general that want to know what kind of an injury history that a specific player has. So you can check that out at Draft Sharks. But
awesome.
Yeah. Let's just hope that he stays healthy. Okay. And now let's get to a couple of players that were not on your list that have caught my eye. And speaking of fumbles, might as well start with McBride from UAB, because that is really the biggest bugaboo that I could see. He's got a fumbling issue, and I know at the level of competition he's in people are going to be like, okay, how good actually is he? That's the only thing. And again, what is his 40 time? But he just does seem like he just seems like a man amongst boys at Conference USA football.
The number one word I have under him is bruiser. He's a guy that wears down defense, or he's a guy that in the second half you just don't feel like tackling him anymore, because not only is he big and strong, he runs with desire, and you can tell he wants to.
Yes.
He doesn't want to run around you. He wants to run through you.
Yes.
He knows that at the end of the game, right, that's going to go in his favor. He's going to cross the goal line because of how much damage he's done to you. The fumbles, though, like I said, there's such an issue, right, with him right now.
And he's not a good receiver either.
Right. So, those are things that have got to be cleaned up. Will he come out this year? I think running backs are always advised by anyone with credibility that, hey, if you're going to get drafted anywhere in the top 5 rounds, you got to come out. And I would think that, if the draft were tomorrow, he's going to be in the top 5 rounds. So you could make a strong case that he will come out. Will it hurt him that he doesn't have much of a receiving skill set to look back on, that he's fumbled the ball 8 times in 2 years? We just talked about Ibrahim's 3 fumbles and 770 career touches. This kid's got 8 in pretty much half as many.
Yes.
So, but again, I all it takes is one coach to look at a situation like that and say, hey, I can fix his ball handling mechanics, where he, holding it, where in terms of where they hold it, how they hold it. And I think that just like Charbonneau that we talked about earlier, he's a guy that you trust in short yardage situations. And that's a problem for a lot of offenses, that third down offense, and getting those converting those third and shorts, fourth and shorts.
Touchdowns.
And touchdowns near the goal line. So,
you're looking at definitely a day 3 guy, though, right?
For sure. I think that you're looking probably around the 150th pick range, which is probably around the 5th round. That's where I would initially start to look at him, unless he comes out and blows it up in workouts. Like we said, that will add some value to him.
And the 40 time is definitely going to be important.
Yes.
Because if he runs a slow 40, he may not even be drafted at all. So
absolutely.
Which again, how many times do we see running backs in the NFL that are day 3 or free agents that actually perform well at the next level?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, all right. What about Chase Brown and the season he's having for Illinois? Because it's just been an incredible. Illinois could end up in the Big Ten championship game. If they do, he is a monster reason why. Yes, they have a very good defense, but he is their offense. And and I know he doesn't appear to be like the most imposing kind of looking athlete. And running back, just when you're looking at him, you're like, nice little running back. But he's just, he's getting it done at the Big Ten level.
He is. And I think one thing about his game that he was on the Bruce Feldman freak list and for speed. I mean, we can talk about his running style next, but he is he can fly once he gets to the open field, and that's why he's having so much success with these big runs. I mean, if you do, and again, it's like I said, he's not the most aesthetically pleasing back, but he's been productive. He's got 20 runs of over 15 plus yards. He's got 41 runs that are 10 yards or more.
NFL wants to hear that.
Yep. Now, what's the issue? It's what we just talked about. He's got 4 fumbles this year, right? And, he doesn't have a huge history. I mean, this is a huge breakout year for him. And, starting his career off at Western Michigan, then transferring to Illinois to play with his brother, Sidney Brown, who I also like. He's one of my favorite kind of special team prospects. He's a safety for Illinois. Okay. But I think that one thing you don't like to see here is he gets a little too – I'm not sure about his vision, I would say.
Okay.
He gets a little too hoppy behind the line, and that's a red flag to me. And if he does get into the open field, he's as dangerous as a back as you're going to find because of that breakaway speed. If you give him an inch, he'll take a foot. If you give him a foot, he'll take a yard. He's always going to kind of maximize those runs once he gets going. I would like to see him press the hole a little bit quicker. Like I talked about earlier with Ibrahim, I think that Brown could learn something from watching him play. And if he can clean up those rough spots, I do think he can move from day 3 into day 2. But like I said, this running back class is so stacked. It really is. I mean, I think there's 8 or 9 guys that if they were in any of the previous 2 or 3 drafts, they're top 3 at the position. And I mean that. And because of that depth, it could end up hurting Chase Brown. But again, it takes one team, one coach to really fall in love with him. And he's an easy guy to fall in love with because he does run hard. He flies once he's in the open field, and maybe he's very early in the progression curve. Maybe.
At least you know what you got, because like we were saying at the beginning, it all depends on every team has a specific running back type that they want. So hey, you're looking for a running back with speed. That's what you're looking for. There you go. He might be the best in the class. That's how fast he is. So
yes. Yep.
By the way, he ran track and field in high school, anchoring the state champion 400-meter relay, and holds school records in the 100-meter dash. Not much of a receiver as well, though. So we talked about doesn't have the receiving ability, has the fumbles. So there are some of the issues. But definitely have to see what happens, too. If Illinois gets themselves in the Big Ten championship game, spotlight's going to be on him like never before, and we'll see how he takes advantage of that or not. So
that'd be a fun watch.
And then the other player I wanted to touch up on before we move on is Keaton Mitchell, who actually is playing Friday night for East Carolina against Cincinnati. So that's a really good opponent. So here we go. We got another Group of 5 player. But I like this kid. I mean, he's very shifty. He's kind of got a little bit of like electricity when he touches the ball. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a big play guy. And I know he's not the biggest guy. I get that. And that's why he's not going to be looked at like the other top prospects at the position. But I think if you're looking for that next wave, day 2 or 3, probably day 3, but if you're looking for that guy that can be a really interesting weapon out of the backfield, I think he should be near the top of the list.
Yeah, I have two profiles that I wrote down under his name that just remind me of. Like sometimes I'll watch a kid on tape. I'm like, hey, I feel like I'm watching so-and-so back from 3-4 years ago. And 2 guys that are in the NFL that have had, some success, not enough for me to really warrant, moving Keaton Mitchell up. Just because, again, the size is an issue. I think the school lists him at 185 pounds. We'll see where he ends up. But, I'm trying to find a mix between Phillip Lindsay and Trenton Cannon with him. 2 guys that weighed in under 190 pounds. I believe both went undrafted, but they had success. They far exceeded a lot of kids that were drafted ahead of them. And again, it's these metrics that some teams just will not get over. The tape is quality. And like you said, the shiftiness, the big playability, and I think that he has, potential to be a big time pass catching back out of the backfield, just based on his skill set. When I watch him catch the ball, it looks so
effortlessly,
easy.
Yes.
Yeah. And it just looks so natural. And if he can find, maybe he kind of makes a team with some special teams aspirations, and then he works his way I'm not sure I see this kid as someone that's going to come in and be a top 3 back on a team right away. I think he's going to have to work his way up. But I like gambling on traits like that. Guys that make people miss. He runs tough, right? He's not a small, like, soft back that, those guys just won't last in the league. You have to be a tough running. You have to be tough if you're going to play the running back position. And, again, if you can get the ball in space and have some things manufactured for him, will he take advantage of those opportunities when thrown his way?
And he, because of the class is so stacked, maybe he comes back.
So. Yeah. I mean, that's another thing I would think. I have him on my list. I did not put him in a list of guys that I think is going to come out. So the list that I sent you, he was not on there. That was the reason. Coming from East Carolina, it's a tough. I think that's going to be a toss-up. Yeah. But tonight's game, I'm looking forward to.
Well, that's the thing, and not that he needs to prove himself, but what he needs is his opportunities on national stage, so people go, "Oh, I've never heard of Keaton Mitchell before."
Right.
Wow. Look at him. And so, that's a game like Cincinnati. And then if East Carolina could win this game, it opens up the door for potentially some bigger games, and maybe they're in the AAC championship game. So
Absolutely.
That's possible.
I think, I agree.
All right, Dave. So that's running backs. We're going to talk receivers next, but when do you think you're going to be posting some running back material? When are we looking forward to that at our lads?
And all these names that we talked about, guys, you'll see some of these little tidbit notes that I have on them up until this point. Not the full report, but at ourlads.com, if you go, you can simply just go to the college depth charts and find these kids. They're all highlighted by where we project them to go in the draft. And that's, a fluid
that's color coded, right?
It's all color coded, and it's a fluid. We change it throughout the year. I would say about a couple times per season, and then once the post draft process starts, we get a little bit more in depth with where we think they're going to go. But if you click on their names, you'll see a couple of these notes that we have on them. Not the full report, but it can give you kind of feel for who these kids are. A couple strengths, maybe one weakness that we want to see change or that could prevent them from going higher in the draft.
Well, that's the thing. It's still in motion, so there's still a lot more story to these players, especially if they wind up coming back. All right, Dave.
Absolutely.
Great job as I was going to say as always, but this has been 2 weeks, so great job again. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, sir.
We'll talk wide receivers next.
All right.